Hi there. I got a message from Chair on Family Connect, I believe it is, about gold and silver inflation and deflation. I think terms like inflation and deflation are really confusing because you can inflate the amount of money and deflate the value of stuff, and inflate or deflate the amount of money and still deflate the value of stuff simply because the money doesn't buy anything anymore. There's can be all kinds of things wrong with those terms, because it basically, inflation means there's more of it and deflation means there's more of it or less of it, and both can have many meanings. If you tie that in with an idea about the price of gold, it gets really confusing. Because gold is a currency in itself. It's simply a means of exchange. There's a limited amount of it on the face of the earth. People know that. They all know that it's also liquid. People like to have it because they believe that people like to have it, and that they see that basically confirmed all the time. But there's a fake gold price at the moment at the COMEX, and people are still trading using that price because otherwise they don't know any liquidity. At least if they are cowards and stupid, then they don't, or if they're simply too lazy to have a real price, or they don't have enough to get considered for the real price. And then what is the real price? It's real confusing. If you buy gold for dollars, what are you doing? You know, you get metal, which is well, in many ways very useful, in return for paper, which is in many ways very useless. And you can use dollars as toilet paper and as wallpaper, and to write on perhaps, or there's actually I believe there's all kinds of stuff in the dollars bills themselves. I believe they recently there are RFIDs in them, and there's other stuff in dollars. Metals, I believe, certain kinds of metals. But you know, that's all very interesting, but completely irrelevant, of course, to the whole quandary. The problem that people have at the moment is to figure out how to make society work, while the main instrument of making it work, let's say the universal contract that binds people, that binds relationships and activities, is basically being demolished under their eyes, and is being created willy-nilly, and is not managed at all. You know, you can look at money, at the dollar for instance, as a standard, which, even if it devalues or it increases in value against something real, can still bind together a lot of contracts in the world. So let's say I rent for $50 a month. I get a salary of $100 a month. Those are two contracts. I have a rent contract and I have a labor contract, and both are expressed in the same currency. So if the dollar becomes worthless, it doesn't really matter, because I still get $100 for my month of work, and I only have to pay $50, so I am left with $50. It's basically a restorative relationship in between everything in society, that you have a currency. And that's, I think, the role of the fiat currency. It's basically that it binds activities in the same unit of exchange. And if you manage that system well, if you respect the real transactions that you do for those units, so for instance for dollars, if you never create dollars just like that, and if you only get out of bed if you at least get $10 an hour or something like that, then that value will be secured. If you stop doing that for several reasons, one of the reasons is that you might want to provide oil for dollars, but you no longer have it. You were trying to hide it, so you want people to have less dollars. So there are less people coming around to buy your oil. Or if you're simply very, very greedy, or actually you're working for somebody that has less oil and that tells you, no, if you steal more money, I like you more. And I'll let you keep your money and spend it in freedom. Then you get people in society that simply are sucking up currency out of society and stealing it. And at the moment we're arriving at the desperate phase where people are simply stealing it, if they can. If they're above the law, they're stealing money. And that system simply will stop having any life at a certain point, because people will simply buy whatever they can for the money that they have, and then start bartering or using other currencies. The first country that has a well-guarded currency that basically can guarantee the limited amount of it will have a very good play. I don't believe Bitcoin is that, and I'm not shrieking if I do that. I think I basically think it's too random. It's too much married to the internet to be functional in a chaotic society. It's much too easy to simply let the internet break down. But so if you are in a society where you, for instance, you have 1 ounce of gold and it's $1,500 now. I didn't look up the number, but let's say. But people are sucking up the money in society. The banks are making it disappear. There's no longer credit extended. Everybody's trying to pay their debts in order to stay out of trouble. And the only persons that are really being rewarded are those that are doing the disciplining, the capturing, the putting in jail, so that this system, this process continues, because a part of the society is incentivized and is left alone with that incentive to do whatever they're doing. Then you will have less and less money. So even if gold, so that means that the value of gold will go down because there's simply less dollars to pay for the gold. But the real stuff in society still needs to be traded, so prices will go up. Or not price will go up, but the value of the dollar will increase. So everything will, and I believe that is, if you want to use term inflation, deflation, that would mean a deflation of the money supply, which means an inflation of the value of the money. It's just too confusing to talk about it. But for that reason, you could say that the price of gold goes down. At the same time, the value of gold goes up, because it's a very pure and very strong means of exchange. So that's, I think, where Prechter sounds confusing if he talks about inflation, deflation, and the price, the value of gold going up in these times of credit sucking, while the price in dollars goes down. There's another confusing process which has to do with the COMEX, which means that if the COMEX is a fictitious price, but it is about fake gold and silver, then it will be left by people at a certain time in favor of real gold and silver. But there's two types of investors in the COMEX. One is the naive type that thinks that they're going to get any metals for their investment in the futures, and the other one that simply wants to ride the dollar value of these metals with the very predictable behavior of the COMEX at the moment. And they get out and they get in when they can and all this stuff. The last group, which is only about having this fantasy share in gold and silver, or this fantasy future in a gold and silver metal, don't care if the COMEX collapses or if there's no gold and silver at all. They simply don't care. I had a discussion about these phantom shares recently, and people said, well, you know, who cares if the company exists? If you can invest in them and the price goes up and down, you can make a profit. But as a result, and the danger really is that the gold price in the world, and I think we're in that phase actually, that the gold price in the world, and at least in the West, is dictated by a completely fictitious market, which doesn't have any metal backing. Which means that you are looking at $1,500 for gold if you go to the COMEX and buy a COMEX future. And that people trading in real gold, they respect that price. Because they're lazy and because they cannot establish autonomy of the gold price, and they cannot establish true barter ability for the metals. And then COMEX collapses because people are really leaving it, either that, and the gold becomes very cheap and the rich people buy all the gold, and then suddenly, you know, the whole system collapses and it's all the rich people that have the gold. Or this just goes on for many years with a fake gold and silver price until the metals are all in the hands of the central banks and people have lost interest in that metal, and Comex closes down or whatever. It's just, there's no escape. If a system is truly fantasy, then there's no escape from it, as long as you keep focusing on it. If you start looking at Asia and in areas where they are using gold and silver in real trade, in real deals, and you can get a real house for it and all that stuff, and people accept it, it's a different story, and that's why these prices are different in Asia, and the behaviors are different, and why Asia is basically trying to get its own autonomous system. I believe it's going to be Hong Kong based, and they started there recently. Anyway, I personally would be very interested to buy silver and gold at the moment, so I will do that as soon as I can, and as soon as I have some reserves. I'm also working on energy. I think that the only way out of the deflation and the crisis is to have as much renewable energy as possible, because you simply, even if the world breaks down around you and there's nothing beyond the horizon, as long as you can plant your crops and feed yourself and heat your home and all that stuff, it's alright. That's what you're trying to achieve with the economy, between brackets. The problem is that the economy as a system, as a financial system, has been understood by criminals, by people without any morals and without any conscience, and they're simply looting it at the moment, as we are basically going like, how can you do this? We're basically in shock. Everybody around the world is trying to understand what goes on in the minds of people that do that. But it's very easy. You can a collapse-driven economy can work just fine. It's like but the only thing is that, for instance, in a competitive economy, which we have due to the fact that we all need the same resource, which is fossil fuels, a competitive economy has a drive to be competitive, and that drive can be exploited. And that means that if you defeat a company, or if a company is defeated, that defeat can be exploited. And if you realize that, well, that's the only way, and I believe a long time ago I read a paper, which actually was from a bank, that says, well, we're now entering a phase in which we have to learn to profit from defeat and from loss, because there's not going to be much growth and much success anymore. And they didn't say give a reason, but of course the reason is that the fossil fuel driver behind growth is not there anymore. So, and the toughest, most immoral, most harshest criminal individuals will keep hopping from let's say the part of the Titanic that's on the water to the part that's still above water, in order to push people off it, throw them in the sea, and make more leaks and holes in the ship, because they feel that they're getting higher up. And it's and then in the end you hope that the whole thing says pop and it's gone. But that destructive attitude is simply going on in the world economy. That's simply that's one of the biggest problems. And just to close with a very, like, some evidence for that, is that simply the CDS is a creation, an insurance which has a very high payout, which is destructive for whoever has to pay that money. We all know that banks don't have the money to pay off all the CDSs if it's a credit default swap or other types of default insurance policies. They don't have the money to do it. So one after the other will break down, and the whole system will break down if there's an avalanche of those kind of defaults, which will be happening, and which has been predicted, which is basically the suicide vest that is worn by almost everybody in the financial sector at the moment, which binds everybody together. But anyway, this is a long video. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it.